There comes a quiet moment in life when your heart begins to question what your kindness has been paying for. You start to notice the weight, how giving feels heavier than it should, how love feels like a transaction, how your presence is welcomed only when it serves a purpose. And in that silence, a truth begins to rise, soft but undeniable. Not everyone who holds your hand is holding your heart. Some are only holding on to what you can give. Tonight, we are going to speak about that truth, the kind that stings before it sets you free. Because the moment you learn to recognize when you are being used is the moment you begin to reclaim your worth. There is a kind of kindness that feels warm on the surface but leaves a quiet chill underneath. It comes wrapped in smiles, in gentle words, in gestures that look like care. But if you sit with it long enough, you begin to notice something missing. Real care does not make you question your worth in the quiet hours of the night. Real care does not disappear when you have nothing left to give. Yet the illusion of care is clever. It knows how to dress itself in affection, how to sound like love, how to feel just real enough to keep you holding on. You may find yourself giving more, stretching further, offering pieces of your time, your energy, your spirit, because you believe in what you think is being returned to you. But slowly, almost invisibly, the balance begins to tilt. You start to realize that their presence is tied to your usefulness. Their warmth grows when you are providing and fades when you are simply being. And in that subtle shift, your heart begins to carry a quiet confusion, wondering why something that looks like love feels so empty. The truth is, not everyone who stands beside you is standing with you. Some are standing in the light you create, enjoying its comfort without ever intending to protect its flame. They will praise your generosity, depend on your strength, lean into your compassion, but they will not pour back into you in the same way. And the hardest part is not their absence of sincerity, but your willingness to believe in it for as long as you did. There comes a moment, however, when your spirit begins to wake up. You start to see that genuine care is not conditional, not convenient, not dependent on what you can offer. It is steady. It remains when you are tired, when you have nothing to give, when you simply need to be held in the same way you have held others. And anything that cannot meet you there is not care, it is consumption. So you begin to choose differently, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You learn that your kindness is not meant to be a resource for others to use, but a gift to be shared with those who honor it. And as that understanding settles into your bones, you stop chasing the illusion. You stop mistaking attention for affection and need for love. You begin quietly and powerfully to return to yourself. And in that return, you find something far more real than anything you were once holding on to. There is a pattern that does not shout, yet it reveals everything if you are willing to see it. It is the rhythm of someone who comes close only when it is convenient, who knows exactly when to find you, not in your silence, not in your struggle, but in the moments when you have something to offer. Their timing feels almost precise, like a knock at your door that only comes when your hands are full and your heart is open. And at first, you may call it coincidence. You may tell yourself that life is simply busy, that people come and go. But deep down, something begins to whisper that this is not chance, it is choice. You start to notice how their presence is tied to their needs. They reach out when they are lonely, when they need support, when they seek comfort or help, and in those moments, they make you feel important, even necessary. They speak in ways that pull you closer, that make you believe your connection matters. But when the roles are reversed, when your voice carries weight, when your heart needs the same space you once gave so freely, there is an absence that cannot be explained away. Calls go unanswered, messages grow cold, and suddenly, the person who once found you so easily becomes distant. It is in that distance that clarity begins to take shape, because real presence does not fade when the spotlight shifts. Real presence does not disappear when you are no longer the one giving. Someone who truly values you does not measure their closeness by what they can receive. They do not calculate their time their attention, their care. They remain, not perfectly, not without fault, but consistently enough for you to feel that you are not alone when it matters most. Yet, selective presence teaches a quiet lesson, one that is often learned through disappointment. It shows you how easy it is to confuse being needed with being valued. It shows you how quickly attention can mimic affection when it arrives at just the right moment. And it reveals how your own generosity can become the very thing that keeps you tied to someone who only visits when it serves them. But there comes a turning point, a moment where you begin to listen more closely to what is not being given. You stop focusing only on when they show up, and you begin to honor the times they do not. You recognize that your worth is not defined by how useful you are, and your presence is not something that should be earned through constant giving. And in that realization, something within you shifts. You begin to step back, not as a form of punishment, but as an act of self-respect. You stop answering every call that only comes with a request. You stop filling spaces where your absence has never been questioned. And as you do, you create room for something more honest, more balanced, more real. Because the truth is simple, even if it is not easy. Someone who only shows up when they need you was never truly there for you at all. And the moment you accept that is the moment you stop waiting for them to stay. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes from loving without receiving, from pouring into a space that never seems to pour back into you. It does not arrive all at once. It builds slowly in the small moments you choose to overlook, the times you showed up without hesitation, the times you gave more than you had, the times you convinced yourself that maybe, just maybe, they would meet you halfway next time. But next time comes, and it looks just like the last. You find yourself becoming the constant, the one who checks in, the one who listens, the one who understands even when you are not understood. You give your patience, your energy, your care, believing that love is something that grows through effort. And it does, but only when that effort is shared, because when it is one-sided, it does not grow. It drains. It takes root in your spirit and slowly begins to wear you down, until giving no longer feels like a choice, but an expectation you have been quietly forced to carry. And the hardest part is not always their taking, it is your giving. Not because your kindness is wrong, but because it is being placed where it is not honored. You may begin to question yourself, wondering if you are asking for too much, if your needs are too heavy, if your desire for balance is somehow unfair. But the truth is, it is not too much to expect reciprocity. It is not too much to want to feel considered, to feel valued, to feel that your presence is not just useful, but meaningful. In a one-sided connection, gratitude becomes rare, almost unfamiliar. Your efforts are accepted as if they are simply what you are supposed to do. There are no pauses to acknowledge you, no moments where your giving is met with genuine appreciation. Instead, there is a quiet assumption that you will continue, that you will keep showing up, that you will keep giving, because you always have. And over time, that assumption becomes a silent agreement, one that you never truly meant to make. But something within you begins to shift when you recognize the pattern. You start to see that love is not meant to feel like depletion, that care is not meant to leave you empty, that the right people will not just take from your kindness, they will protect it, respect it, and return it in ways that remind you why you gave in the first place. And in that awareness, you begin to loosen your grip. You do not have to stop being kind. You do not have to close your heart, but you do have to choose where your energy goes. You have to learn that giving is powerful, but only when it flows both ways. And when it does not, when it becomes a one-way street with no return, you are allowed to step back. You are allowed to save your light, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. Because the truth is, the right connection will never ask you to carry the weight alone. And the moment you stop carrying it for someone else is the moment you begin to feel whole again. There is a subtle kind of control that does not raise its voice, yet it presses heavily on your spirit. It comes not through force, but through guilt, carefully placed, quietly repeated until you begin to carry it as if it belongs to you. You may not notice it at first. It feels like concern, like disappointment, like words wrapped in emotion that make you pause and reconsider yourself. But over time, those words begin to shape how you see your own needs. You start to feel uneasy the moment you think about saying no. A simple boundary begins to feel like a betrayal. You hesitate, not because you are wrong, but because you have been made to feel that choosing yourself somehow harms someone else. And so you bend. You agree when you are tired. You give when you are empty. You stay when every part of you is asking for space. Not out of love alone, but out of the quiet fear of being seen as selfish. And they know this. Whether consciously or not, they lean into it. They remind you of all they have done, all they have been through, all the reasons why you should understand, why you should continue, why you should not pull away. They may not demand directly, but they leave just enough weight in their words to make you feel responsible for their feelings. And in that moment, your boundary is no longer just about you. It becomes something you feel guilty for even needing. But the truth is, guilt should never be the price of self-respect. You are not wrong for needing rest. You are not wrong for protecting your time, your energy, your peace. And you are certainly not wrong for recognizing when something no longer feels balanced. The discomfort you feel when you begin to set boundaries is not proof that you are doing something bad. It is proof that you are doing something new. There comes a moment when you begin to see the pattern for what it is. You realize that every time you tried to step back, something pulled you forward again, not with understanding, but with emotional weight that made you question yourself. And in that realization, a quiet strength begins to form. You start to understand that your kindness was never meant to be controlled, and your compassion was never meant to be used against you. So you begin to stand a little firmer. Your no may still feel uncomfortable, your distance may still feel unfamiliar, but you no longer let guilt rewrite your truth. You listen to yourself more closely than you listen to the pressure around you. And slowly, you begin to separate what you genuinely owe from what you were made to feel you owe. Because real connection does not punish you for having limits. It does not make you feel heavy for taking care of yourself. It respects your boundaries even when they are inconvenient. And anything that tries to make you feel guilty for honoring your own needs is not protecting your heart. It is asking you to abandon it. The moment you refuse to do that is the moment you begin to take your power back. There is a certain kind of disappointment that does not come from what was said, but from what was never truly meant. It lives in promises that sounded beautiful in the moment, words that felt like reassurance, like change, like hope gently placed into your hands. You wanted to believe them, not because you were naive, but because your heart recognized the possibility of something better. And so you held on, trusting that what was spoken would one day be lived. At first, the words feel enough. They soften the hurt, they fill the silence, they give you a reason to stay a little longer. I'll do better, they say. Things will change. And for a moment, it feels like they might. You see small efforts, brief shifts, just enough to convince you that this time is different. But time has a way of revealing what words try to hide, because patterns do not break through intention alone. They break through action, through consistency, through a willingness to truly become something new. And when that willingness is not there, the cycle quietly begins again. The same behaviors return, the same excuses follow, and the same apologies arrive, dressed in slightly different language but carrying the same emptiness. You begin to notice that the promises are not bridges to change, they are pauses between repetitions. And each time you believe them, you find yourself standing in the same place, wondering why nothing feels different. It is not easy to accept that someone can speak with sincerity and still fail to act with it, that they can look into your eyes and mean what they say in that moment, yet lack the depth to sustain it beyond that moment. But truth is not found in what someone intends. It is found in what they consistently do. Words may reflect desire, but actions reveal commitment. And when those two are not aligned, it is the actions that tell the real story. There comes a point where your heart grows tired of restarting, tired of giving fresh chances to the same unchanged behavior, tired of hoping that this time the promise will hold. And in that quiet exhaustion, clarity begins to settle in. You realize that you are not asking for perfection. You are asking for effort that lasts, for change that stays, for words that carry enough truth to shape reality. So you begin to listen differently. You stop holding on to what is said and you start watching what is done. You allow patterns to speak louder than apologies and consistency to matter more than intention. And in doing so, you free yourself from the endless loop of waiting for someone to become who they said they would be. Because the truth, as simple as it is difficult, is this: someone who truly wants to change will show you, not just once, not just when they feel they might lose you, but in the quiet, ordinary moments where no promise needs to be spoken. And when that is absent, no amount of beautiful words can build what consistent action refuses to create. There is a heaviness that comes when love is measured, weighed, and dispensed only when it is convenient for someone else. You begin to notice it in small ways first: a smile that appears only when you say the right words, a touch that lingers only when you have fulfilled a request, a warmth that comes and goes depending on how useful you are in their world. And at first you try to justify it, telling yourself that perhaps they are busy or stressed or distracted, but deep down, your heart knows that something more fundamental is wrong. When love feels conditional, it stops being nourishment and begins to feel like currency. Every act of affection carries with it an expectation, a subtle reminder that it is not freely given. You notice how every kind word, every gesture of care, seems to arrive only after you have met their needs or made their life easier. It is as if your worth in their eyes is not tied to who you are, but to what you can provide. And the more you give, the more they expect, until your generosity feels less like love and more like an obligation you cannot escape. This kind of love leaves your spirit unsettled. You begin to question yourself, wondering if you are doing enough, giving enough, being enough. You replay moments in your mind, searching for signs that you have failed in some invisible way. You start to doubt your instincts, your needs, your right to want care in return. And slowly the people who are supposed to make you feel safe, cherished, and seen begin to make you feel small, unworthy, or always behind in the invisible ledger of affection. Yet, even in this imbalance, your heart continues to hope. You hope that their love will someday be unconditional, that their warmth will arrive without demand, that the connection can exist simply for the sake of connection itself. But hope alone does not change patterns. True love is not a transaction, and it does not appear only when it suits the giver. It is steady, it is generous, it uplifts without expectation. It sees you, not just your usefulness. There comes a point when you begin to recognize the truth. If love arrives only when someone benefits from you, it is not love. It is a reflection of their needs, not your worth. And in that recognition, a quiet strength begins to form. You learn that your heart does not have to remain open to conditional affection. You learn that your spirit deserves consistency, care, and reciprocity. You learn that love, in its truest form, is not something you chase. It is something that finds you without demand. So you start to step back, not with anger, but with clarity. You stop bending yourself to meet someone else's measure of affection. You allow your presence to be valued, not earned. And in the space you create, you begin to feel the freedom of self-respect, the freedom to love and be loved in ways that honor your worth, not just your usefulness. Because the love that asks you to meet conditions is never the love that can truly stay. And the moment you stop waiting for it is the moment your heart begins to breathe again. There is a quiet voice inside you that has always known the truth, even before your mind catches up. It does not shout, it does not demand attention with drama or force. It whispers in the stillness of your heart, in the pauses between conversations, in the uneasy feeling that rises when something is off. At first, you might try to ignore it, telling yourself that your doubts are unfair, that your judgment is clouded by mood or fear, or that perhaps you are overthinking. But intuition is patient, and it repeats itself until you can no longer overlook it. That inner voice notices patterns that your eyes may want to deny. It sees how someone's attention arrives only when it serves them, how excuses replace follow through, how promises vanish like mist when the reality is inconvenient. Your intuition feels the imbalance in the energy you give versus the energy you receive. It senses when love is conditional, when care is absent, when connection is only a transaction dressed as affection. And even when your heart wants to rationalize, your intuition does not lie. It recognizes what your emotions alone may be unwilling to admit. Ignoring that voice often leads to confusion and pain. You begin to question yourself instead of questioning their behavior. You wonder if your feelings are too sensitive, your expectations too high, your hope too fragile. You search for signs of genuine care in the very places where it is lacking, hoping that what feels wrong can somehow be justified or overlooked. But intuition is persistent. It will keep nudging softly but firmly until you can no longer ignore the truth that has been quietly speaking all along. Listening to your intuition requires courage because it often asks you to act before there is clear evidence, before others confirm your suspicions. It asks you to trust yourself when it feels safer to trust them. It asks you to set boundaries before they are tested, to step back before you are drained, to speak up before you are silenced. And when you finally honor it, you find that the path it has been guiding you toward was never about fear. It is about preservation, about clarity, about valuing yourself enough to recognize the difference between care that nourishes and care that consumes. Your intuition also brings freedom. It frees you from the endless cycle of hoping that someone will change when change is not forthcoming. It frees you from giving more than you are received, from explaining yourself when you should not have to, from staying in patterns that diminish your spirit. When you begin to listen, truly listen, your inner voice becomes your compass. It shows you where your heart belongs, where your energy is respected, and where your love can exist without cost to your soul. And the remarkable thing about intuition is that it always aligns with your best interest, even when it feels uncomfortable. It is your own spirit speaking to you, reminding you that you deserve honesty, consistency, and respect. It tells you that the people who truly belong in your life will meet you with reciprocity, not obligation. It warns you when someone's presence is fleeting, conditional, or consuming. And the more you honor that voice, the stronger it grows, until you no longer have to question whether someone is using you. The signs become undeniable, and your heart no longer settles for anything less than what it deserves. There is a particular kind of silence that hurts more than harsh words ever could. It is the silence that meets your honesty, the quiet dismissal that follows when you finally gather the courage to express how you feel. You speak, not to argue, not to accuse, but simply to be understood. And yet, your words seem to fall into a space where they are neither held nor heard. They are brushed aside, softened into something smaller, or ignored altogether as if they carry no real weight. At first, you may try to explain yourself better. You search for clearer words, gentler tones, the right way to say things so that you can finally be acknowledged. You adjust your delivery, hoping that maybe the problem is not their listening, but your speaking. But no matter how carefully you choose your words, the outcome remains the same. Your feelings are minimized, turned into overreactions, or met with indifference that makes you question whether they mattered at all. And slowly, something begins to change within you. You start to hesitate before speaking. You hold back your thoughts, swallow your emotions, convince yourself that it is easier to stay quiet than to feel dismissed again. What once flowed naturally from your heart now feels like something you must measure, filter, or even hide. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you have learned that your voice is not received with care. But the truth is, your voice was never the problem. The problem lies in the space that refuses to make room for it. Because in any real connection, your feelings are not inconveniences, they are essential. They are part of who you are, and they deserve to be met with attention, with patience, with respect. Someone who values you does not silence you, does not make you feel small for expressing yourself, does not treat your emotions as something to be endured rather than understood. When your voice is consistently ignored, it creates a quiet loneliness that lingers even in someone's presence. You can be sitting right beside them, yet feel miles away, disconnected not by distance, but by the absence of understanding. And that kind of loneliness is often more painful than being alone, because it carries the weight of being unseen while standing in plain sight. There comes a moment, however, when you begin to recognize that being unheard is not something you have to accept. You start to see that your voice is not meant to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. It is meant to be expressed, to be acknowledged, to exist fully without apology. And in that realization, you begin to reclaim something you may have slowly lost, the confidence to speak without fear of being dismissed. You begin to choose spaces where your words are not only heard, but valued, where your emotions are not debated, but respected, where your voice does not echo back in emptiness, but is met with presence and care. Because the truth is simple, even if it takes time to accept. Anyone who consistently ignores your voice is not just failing to listen, they are showing you that they do not value what you have to say. And the moment you understand that is the moment you stop silencing yourself for the comfort of someone who was never truly listening.